So, so with my hobbies, whether it's the producing music or out on my bike on like a long old ride, just that unplug from the world and just being with myself and just away from everything is just that big dose of serotonin that helps me get through everything. Hello, welcome to my crib. Yeah, I thought we'd just take a little walk to the workshop. It's quite a nice space when the weather's like this. Quite a nice place to take a couple of takes and stuff. Got quite the pretty view in the back garden. That'd be worth getting some B-roll of this. Yeah. Beautiful weather, perfect for this. Anyone want a free van? No? Don't know whose it is. Mine now. Follow me on Instagram. Going in. I'm Harper Barnes, I'm 19 and I'm a music producer. So yeah, like growing up I suffered quite badly with a lot of depression, like severe clinical depression, so on and so forth, crippling anxiety, substance abuse, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, just the gist really. So where I really had no parental figures and stuff like that, I was out partying with older people and stuff like that. And they'd be like, oh, try this, hands me a little bit of coke. Try this, passes me a joint and stuff like that. Oh, take this, there's a little ecstasy pill there. Then I liked the feeling of when I was on those drugs and on those substances. Then I started doing them more often, going out to like illegal raves, getting absolutely slaughtered on drugs and stuff like that. Then it just came to a point where I was doing that sort of stuff on a daily basis, was spending almost 600, 700 pounds that I realistically didn't have on cocaine and those sorts of things, which then led me down a life of crime, theft, stealing, like pickpocketing people, and wasn't nice. So my addictions, it started off really with self-harm, although it doesn't really sound like much of an addiction. It's something that relieved a lot of pressure off me, so I got addicted to the feeling of that, which then unfortunately led to a lot of drug addiction. I spent a good 2.5, 3 years of my life addicted to cocaine and harder stuff like that. Like it's at the point there, you name a drug that I've pretty much been on it. It taught me an awful lot about the streets and the way the sort of it sounds silly when I say it, but the way like the sort of politics works around it, because as simple as it seems, there are little subcultures around that live around things of crime, whether that's car theft, burglary, drugs rings and shit. So it taught me an awful lot of how to survive out and about when doing things I shouldn't. This stemmed from a lot of issues I had in my childhood: abandonment, abuse, both physical and mental abuse. I had real bad abandonment issues from my father growing up. I experienced a lot of abuse from my mum and grandparents, and that pretty much caused the spiral that led to all of the major issues I had in my life. There's a lot of stuff that is essentially like branded into my brain. Like there was one scenario, I couldn't have been any older than 5, 6, where my mum was in a bad mood. She got really shitty with me, and she started getting angry. And me, being the scared little kid I was, ran upstairs. Next thing I know, I got a handful of keys and key rings about yay big, thrown at my back. Ended up slicing my back open and stuff like that. And ended up in the hospital getting 4 stitches from that. But my mum put it down to me falling over something. So, with my mum, she always considered herself sort of like the black sheep of the family, so she felt like an outcast. So I'm assuming she had like a lot of pent up anger, a lot of pent up rage, and that sort of shit. And like a lot of that probably would have contributed. And unfortunately, my mum did suffer some sexual assault from a family member. I'm not going to go into detail about that because it's not my place to, but that didn't help a lot of my mum's mental health issues, plus substance abuse as well. To this day still, my mum is still on coke, speed, bits of heroin here and there. My mum does sell her body to pay the wages. All that sort of stuff. Although she does somehow still leech off the benefits of the government. Got to do what you got to do, really. But with my mum being a prostitute, it did lead to some really weird issues with men constantly bouncing in and out of my life, which caused a lot of confusion growing up. So they'd be like, "Oh, who's this geezer walking through the door? New dad." But no, it fucked me up. Fucked me up an awful lot. My father is my father. I'm quite lucky with that. Not so sure about my brother, unfortunately. He might be to do with the prostitution and stuff like that, but I'm definitely my dad's. So I initially reconnected with my dad in 2018, where I stumbled across his Facebook profile, and I thought, you know what? Fuck it, let's send him a message. Let's see what it's about, because I always grew up thinking my father was evil. He was this vindictive fucker that just didn't care about his kids at all. But I sent him a message, we had a conversation, he seemed alright. Then things went quiet between us for a while. Then this is the strangest thing. So I was with a friend of mine and his little brother. We were going to Playzone to take him out just after Christmas. And I ended up bumping into my dad and stepmom at that Playzone. Then we ended up sitting down, having a conversation. I witnessed how he was with his kids and stuff like that. And from there, I really learned who he was. And to be honest, it was quite a relief. Because my mum wasn't much of a mum at all. And for the short space of time, realistically, my dad has been in my life. He has been an excellent father, trying to rebuild that relationship. But as you can imagine, after stuff like that, it's quite hard to rebuild that relationship and rekindle what was never really there. But my dad did what he had to do to get away from my abusive mother and stuff like that. Credit where credit's due, he did well. He joined the military, he served our country. He is still actively serving our country, and I don't blame him for it. Quite frankly, if I had that father figure in my life, I wouldn't be in the absolute shithole I am now. I would actually have that person that I'd be able to go to and actually be able to talk about stuff. There were a lot of things that I missed out on in my childhood because I didn't have a father figure, like my dad teaching me how to shave, my dad teaching me how to fix things, and that sort of stuff you ordinarily do with your father. I never really got to experience that. So in terms of those aspects, I was rather emotionally and mentally underdeveloped with the lack of father figure. I had very, very little influence with that sort of stuff. The majority of my father figure influence came from older friends of mine. I got friends that are 20, 25, 30 and stuff like that. They were essentially the ones that swept me under their wing and gave me like those sorts of talks you'd have with your father, the sort of things you'd do, like a friend of mine taught me how to fish and all that sort of stuff that you would ordinarily go out with your dad to do. I had a friend who was a music producer, and I sat down in his studio and I fiddled about on all the software and stuff and essentially found my grip in music, but I obviously didn't have the money to invest in it because I was stuck in this hole of addiction, and it was also absolutely slaughtering my physical health. And with the assistance of a friend, I managed to get myself clean. No medical professionals were willing to help me. They were essentially like, you're a lost cause, that we can't help you. And the whole getting clean process was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. It wasn't that sort of wean yourself down, they'll stick you on something that gives you the feeling, but it's not the same substance. It was, I spent about 3-4 months around a friend of mine's house, locked in a room, constantly supervised. They'd come up to give me food, keep me hydrated, and I essentially just went cold turkey, dealt with the withdrawal symptoms, and came out the other side completely fucking clean. And I've been clean for around 2.5 years now. I have been very heavily involved in music production, instruments and stuff like that since secondary school, where I started picking up music as an option, and I just essentially followed it through and just carried on down the route of music. In terms of music production, I used to just sit on a little shitty app on my phone that was essentially like drum loops and stuff, where I just click buttons and it makes sounds. And it sort of went from there. I invested in a cheap PC that only cost a couple of £100, installed FL Studio, started fiddling about with that. Then I just essentially got myself in a groove. Then obviously where I was clean, I paid off the majority of my drug debts and stuff. Then I got a bulk of money together, then invested in my studio, then started studying at a college. Then from there really it sort of took off. I'm now like a full-scale producer. I own a record label. I am producing industry standard tracks. I work with somewhat big people. So essentially, for a lack of better words, music saved my life. It found something that I could grip on that wasn't shoving random chemicals into my body that basically drove me to insanity. And rather than using those drugs to give me my escape from like pulling me out of reality, I can sit there in my studio and get everything out in music. I may not release it, I may not finish it, but just that little clip of my emotions getting out helps me way more than the drugs ever did. Yeah, so we were just in the workshop. I spent quite a fair bit of time on that, working on my bike. Picked that thing up as a shit box that didn't run, and with the help of a few mates, got that thing running pretty decent. It's a mad little ripper it is for a ducky little 125. Yeah, it just does the job really. Flying down the road, pissing off all the neighbours out in the countryside with that loud ass thing. Kinda want to straight pipe it though. I know it's a bit much, just a smidge much. Plenty of stuff to do on it. Just debating whether or not to chop it to shit. It'd be an interesting build. The final thing with motorbikes, they're simple beasts. It's not like modifying a car. It doesn't take you like 3 weeks just to get a fucking sensor to make sure your engine starts. Fields are looking pretty nice today, now they've mowed them. Honestly look like my mum's downstairs for the fact they haven't shaved them for so long. Sorry, poor thing. Yeah, I'll grab it. Fuck yeah. Anyone want a forklift? They're easy enough to hot wire. So the reason I came to live on the farm was because I am a former care kid. In the care system, when you hit 18, you've got to move on, and there's two routes you can go down. There's either the grouped housing route, so that's like multiple people living in the same building, things like Crystal House and Brent House and things like that. Or there's supported lodging, where you rent a room in someone else's house. So it's essentially like being in foster care, just without that support and without that foster carer and stuff like that. Just pretty much go about your day, do what you want. And I went down the supported lodging route, and this was available. And I quite liked the place. I quite liked the people that were there. It's quite nice actually being away from the city for a while, although it does drive you mad after a while. But yeah, no, so hit 18, looked for places, this was available, and I decided to come here out of all the places I could have gone. With people that live in the city, their nearest shop is a 5-minute walk round the corner, or to see their mates is a 10-minute walk down the road. For me, I have to travel no less than half an hour one way to get to the nearest proper shop that isn't an overpriced Londis in a village. Or it takes me about 45 minutes to go to my girlfriend's and go see other people. It's just a ball's ache. Things take time out here. And post is delayed by 2 days. So if I order something off Amazon, I've got to wait 2 extra days. I mean, there are benefits to living here. Like, living anywhere, there's pros and cons, but the benefits really outweigh the cons here. Like, if I want to go for a walk, I've got miles and miles of countryside to go for a walk, and I can spend a lot of that still on farmlands because of how much there is. And it just gives you that chance to like go outside and be immersed in nature and not have to worry about that one guy in his straight pipe Honda Civic disturbing your peace. Just nah, don't get that out here. Most you'll hear is a tractor every so often. So initially, while living here, I did have to cycle everywhere, but now, after investing in a motorbike, I just use that to get from A to B 9 times out of 10. Still cycle every so often because you got to keep healthy. Healthy body, healthy mind. As silly as it sounds, that little bit of exercise each day does help quite a fair bit. But yeah, it's mainly the motorbike that gets me to and from places. So I got into motorbikes and motorcycling from friends, really. I never really had an interest in riding bikes. Growing up until I was in college and made a couple of friends who were on bikes. And it kind of took off from there, really, because one of them convinced me to go take my CVT just to get a taste of it. And from there, I really fell in love with bikes and riding motorcycles. Yeah, so actually being on the road, especially being in somewhere as remote as the farm, like my nearest superstore is almost 9 miles away. Like, it's made my life so much easier because originally I was cycling everywhere, and that at the best of times was physically demanding as fuck. And just being able to hop on something with an engine that gets me from A to B up to 60 mile an hour on a steep enough hill, it's pretty dandy. It's pretty dandy. Helps a lot. The one bit of riding that I seems to help the most with my mental health is going out at 3 o'clock in the morning on empty roads and absolutely fly. Like, during the day, yeah, it's nice to ride and all, but if it's 3 o'clock in the morning on empty roads and you can get away with taking that corner at 40 plus mile an hour, it's just that shit, if I fuck this up, I'm gonna end up in hospital, I feel so alive sort of thing. Like, it's essentially like speed therapy. Like, need to get out, need to get some shit out, pull that throttle all the way out and fly through those gears. Currently, in terms of my mental health, I have been a little bit on and off. My meds have been a bit haywire recently, but I've just been pushing through it really. It's just one of those things you got to deal with. You'll have up days, you'll have down days. You just got to keep pushing really. Like, things might be rough for you at the moment, but once you come the other side of that, you'll have your best times. My friends definitely help me the most, because they're that place I can go to just to talk, or for a hug if I need to, or simply just to chill out for a bit, just to get away from the situations that's been not the best for me. Just that ability to get away and not have to worry about it for a little bit. Like, mental health, yes, it's a bitch, yes, it's a struggle, but as silly as it sounds, it's worth it in the end. Because yeah, I've gone through a lot of mental hardship, yes, I've gone through a lot of bad shit, but it's made me the person I am to this day, and for that I will forever be grateful. So it's worth pushing through that day, it's worth getting through that rough patch, it's worth dragging yourself out of bed, even if it's just to do your washing or go have a shower, even if it's something as simple as that. Just keep pushing, it's worth it in the end. And if you've got a good support bubble around you, good friends, good family support, it makes the world a difference. It's just not worth quitting.
Ready for the siren.
Alex, this is going to be the most overproduced zero budget film ever.
Welcome to the Tim. The Tim, poster Tim.
Hello camera, it's me, your director. How you doing?